I just wanted to have a quick tour around the Jamovi interface. This might look slightly different to your own version of Jamovi depending on what extra modules you've got installed. So I have this extra module installed which does meta-analysis. You might have other ones installed, or you might not have any installed at all. I think I've also got extra plots installed here under exploration. So the way that Jamovi is set up is you have this top level of menus. So the first one is about your usual file structures. So you can create new files, open files, special imports, which is import types of files from other statistical programs, save, so saving within the own format of Jamovi, save as, which is saving as a particular different file name or different type, and exporting, which is creating files which are going to be compatible with other programs. I'm just having a look at what kind of exports you can do. So you can export in SPSS files, SAS files, Stata if you happen to be using those. There's also CSV, which is a common format for spreading data between different programs. It can be read by most other programs. There's also R objects and datasets because Jamovi runs on top of R, as well as PDFs if you wanted to export document version, so a very text version of what you're doing. So that's the first menu. Second menu is variables. If there's no data in there, it's not particularly interesting, but this is saying that that particular data frame has three variables A, B and C. You can see here they're represented by these three round circles. If you're familiar with SPSS, you'll understand what this means. This means that these are categorical variables, so I'm going to come back to that later. When you put in data, it is a good idea to define data types so you have a richer storage of the type of data, and this means the program can understand what kind of analysis you can do. If you're inexperienced in data analysis, it will prevent you from doing data analysis that you're not allowed to do. Categorical things like colours, your favourite colour, or months of the year, you can't average. You can't say, well, one person in the class liked red, one person liked white, so the average colour that people like is pink. Doesn't make any sense. But if I pick height, I can average that. So if you've got something which is a measure variable, something on a continuous scale or a scale variable, this will be not these three round circles which represent like a Venn diagram and groups, categories that things can be put into. They'll represent by a little symbol of a ruler, which means they're a scale measure. So defining your variable types is quite important. Within the variable menus, you've got edit, compute things. You can do transformations. So if you've got data and you decide you want to take the logarithms of it, you can do that here. You can add columns, delete columns, you can filter things. So if you only want to look at a subset of the data dependent on particular properties of certain rows, then you can do this. Next you have the data menu. So you've got cut and paste functions backwards and forwards, so undo and redo. You've got setting up things. So here, as I said, you've got three columns set up for you to type in data to start with. You can compute things and do transformations of things. If you wish to do weighted data, you can add that here, which is useful if you've got old-fashioned data. So data where they've given a set of measurements and then recorded the number of people that fit in that particular measurement class. You can do weighted data sets, which saves you having to input a lot of raw data. Again, add and delete columns, filtering, and you can add and delete rows. You've got the analysis menu, which gives you exploration. So this is the first and most important step you're ever going to do with anything, any set of data. You need to do some exploratory data analysis just to see what your data looks like. You've got t-tests, so hypothesis tests, where you're comparing means. You've got ANOVA, which is hypothesis tests about means, but using variances. This is something that you use when you've got more than 2 groups, or if you've got several categorical variables that divide your data set into multiple groups along 2 different types of groups. So for example, if I'm looking at plants, I could look at the fertilizer that I'm giving them, and I can look at the watering regime I give them, or I could look at the amount of sunlight they get. There's various things I could use. So sunlight or watering and fertilizer are 2 different aspects of the treatment. They're 2 different ways that I can treat my plants. So that's called a two-way ANOVA. Regression is fitting a line through your data. This can be through a standard XY plot where you've just got one particular variable which is determining another. It can also happen that you have multiple variables, and there are special types of regression which are called logistic regression, which is just between 1 and 0 on the x-axis. There's methods involving frequencies. This is binomial tests, goodness of fit tests, chi-squared tests, and McNemar's tests, and more complicated log linear regression. Factor analysis, so this looks at principal components and exploratory factors. So this is what happens when you've got data which has lots and lots and lots of columns, lots of different variables, and you want to find out which ones are the most important ones. You can look at principal components, and this will simplify your data set. Now, as I said, I've got an extra one which is meta-analysis, and these are the specific things that meta-analysis wants to do. A very important button is the plus button. So this allows you to add modules. So the ones I've got here are the basic module, which is automatically installed, the scatter one, which adds the scatter plot and Pareto chart, and I've got major installed, which does meta-analysis addition from Jamovi. If you look on here and you want to manage add some extra ones, you can look in the Jamovi library and see what else is available. So there's scatter that I've got installed. You can edit R code within Jamovi if that's the way you want to go. Do power analysis for research designs or linear models. You can have general linear models depending on what your understanding of linear models is. Bayesian techniques, transformations of data sets, so instead of just doing logarithms you can do more complicated ways of doing things. The confidence intervals, which are one of my favorite things. Path analysis, if you are interested in understanding which variables are important out of your statistical analysis. Robust statistics, this is a way of extending statistics outside of just normally distributed data to apply tests in more unusual cases, and various other functions. These are analysis of how successful your model is, parametric, non-parametric t-tests, and so on. Survival analysis, which is death watch. But these are all much more technical additions, and you're only going to want to use these if you have something much more specific that you need to do. So for example, this one's fairly interesting, which is to add more tests, because it includes ANCOVA, which is doing regression but over multiple lines to see if they have differences in slopes or original or points of origin, which might be something you want to do. Installing is easy. You just click on the install button and it installs it. So I've installed the extra tests, which I presume are going to be hidden underneath the other test that's there. If I look at managed installed, major and axis mod, so it's added Kolmogorov, Smirnov and Anderson-Darling to normality tests, as well as these other Bartlett's to t-test and the others. So if you need anything extra and you find that it's not in the basic version of Jamovi, First place to look is under the plus modules.